Well, welcome to ManTalk. My name is Vince Miller. I'm your founder and host. Good to be with you today. We're excited to be in this new series with you. It's entitled 30 Virtues That Build a Man. Today, we're looking at the lesson entitled Submission. I'm excited to have Chris Koelzer with me today. Thanks for being with us, Chris.
Thank you, Vince. Happy to be here.
This guy works with T6 Victory and is an amazing man. I've really gotten to know you over the last maybe 10 years or so.
Almost, 9 years.
You know, I would love for you to tell guys a little bit about T6 Victory because it is a fantastic concept on teaching businesses leadership and business principles. Share with us about T6 Victory.
Sure. My partners and I are former military pilots, and we started T6 Victory with the intent of taking what we had learned in the military, and then we had applied to business over our business careers, and taking that to corporate America. And really, it boils down to one word, and that's trust. The trust we learned in the military, and how that creates uncommon value, and how businesses, companies, teams of any size, shape, or mission can use that to deepen their relationships and create greater value for their clients.
So I remember this is maybe about a year ago now or so when T6 began. You took me up on a flight. Right? And so you use this kind of flight experience. So now I'm getting to fly with an F-18 pilot, right? Former F-18 pilot, right? And so now I'm going up on a plane with you, and you're walking me through an experience of really understanding leadership by being a passenger in your plane. And I thought it was fantastic, by the way. I'd highly recommend it for everybody, but I was amazed by the amount of business principles I learned in a 1 hour experience with you, right? From the beginning to the end. And I will never forget, as long as I'm living, you're coaching me through the experience in this really old military plane, right?
Right.
And you set me down, I put on my jumpsuit, I start to strap in, and you're explaining to me what's going to happen if something tragic happens with this plane, and you're teaching me how to parachute out of this plane. And I got to tell you, I am dialed in that moment, because in this moment I realized, wow, this is really serious. I better trust Chris Koelzer, my pilot, in this moment, and I was tuned in. So talk to us a little bit about submission and trust. How does submission relate to trust?
I think trust is the core of submission, because at that point you submitted yourself as a passenger in the aircraft only because you decided to trust me. You could have said, hey, I don't like all this talk about jumping out of airplanes and ditching in water and fires and everything else, and said, I'm out of here. But you made the decision, never having flown with me before, that you listened to the briefing and I sounded like I knew what I was talking about apparently, and you decided to trust me and go flying. So you submitted to me in that respect as a crewmate. You were really part of the crew. We were a team. 2 people in an airplane, a team. And then we didn't just fly ourselves, right? What did we do when we took off?
Well, we went through a bunch of exercises and a bunch of checklists, and you walked me through an explanation of the plane and showed me how the instrument panel worked, and
all these procedures and stuff that pilots do on a daily basis, and it could be mimicked in any business environment. But then when we took off, we went, remember our mission was a flyover, memorial flyover with 4 total airplanes. So now you have not just our team, the Chris and Vince team in our airplane, but we joined one more airplane, and now we're a team of teams. We got 2 different teams, there's another aircraft with 2 people in it, and then 3 and 4. We have 4 airplanes. We became this team of teams, all of us having to trust everybody else implicitly, literally with our lives in that environment.
Okay, so this was a profound moment for me. So, guys, Chris took me up in this airplane with a bunch of really, I'd say, ex-Marines, ex-pilots. There was an astronaut.
There was an astronaut in that flight. He'd flown the space shuttle 5 times.
Really?
Commanded the space shuttle twice. Yeah, Kurt Brown. But then it went from an astronaut with as much military and test flying experience as pretty much anybody on the planet, down to a guy who had a business in Minnesota, sold it and bought an airplane, and just had regular general aviation flying experience. So the spectrum was there, but because they had been trained properly and had developed competence, relationship, and we knew their integrity, I trusted them, you trusted me, I brought you into this new environment, totally founded on trust, in which you submitted to me, I submitted to my flight leader. The flight is 2 aircraft. The 4-plane flight leader now is overall in control. And so there is trust and submission woven throughout that entire event in an extremely dynamic, complex, and really should have been a very dangerous environment, but it was done routinely because of trust.
Because of trust. Now, the second moment I remember about going up with you in T6 victory was we were flying in formation. I think Kurt Brown was in the lead, and we were kind of in the fourth position on the right side. And I just remember this moment. It's so vivid to me, but I remember you were holding onto the stick. I could see you in front of me, but your eyes were not only locked on your surroundings, you were locked on Kurt. I mean, in that primary position. You guys were all just kind of focused on him. And I was blown away by the amount of focus, trust, submission that all became real to me. It was like the beauty of this formation and the beauty of flying this mission, which was a bomber mission, by the way, which was way fun, was learning how much we rely upon each other in that moment. That has really burned on my memory. I haven't forgotten that. It's been a year, but I still remember how dead focused you were on looking at him while you're holding the stick, aware of your surroundings, but fully submitted to his path, direction, the path that he chose to fly in the air. That was really good. That was really good, I think, for me to see the value of it. Now, why is it important to submit from your perspective, especially in moments like that?
Well, let's try. We'll draw it back to that because that close formation flying is indicative or symbolic of any situation, whether it's a marriage, a family, a business environment. You got 2 people, 4 people, 4,000 people. In that place, we were flying so tight where everything Kurt did, I had to mimic. If his wing came 2 degrees down to the right, ours had to come 2 degrees down to the right. And there was no flexibility. It was almost rigid submission, and my eyes were locked on him because if I looked away for more than a second, he could do something and it could be disastrous. So I had to focus on him completely and trust him for his vision, where we were going, what the mission was, all those kinds of things. But then, depending on the level of trust within an organization or the surroundings, the mission, whatever you're trying to accomplish, you can loosen up those parameters to where now if we had taken it out to 50 yards or half a mile, we're still a formation. Right. We're still submitted to Kurt and everybody else is, but now we have some more flexibility to maneuver. So you can take that into a business environment where instead of having a leader that completely controls everything their people are doing in a close formation kind of a mindset, you can empower them with agility to think on their own, act on their own, be autonomous, and take advantage of situations.
That's one of the things I love about T6 Victory and what it's teaching people is it's teaching how you're using the tools and the tactics and the techniques of your trade as an F-18 pilot. You're passing those on to business leaders to help them to understand how to leverage these same things in a very memorable way with their businesses, right? Just like you said there, you're translating it all in a business language and using it to train people in a memorable way. I be honest with you, I'll never forget that for the rest of my life. And now you fused in these lessons, like on submission here,
right,
into my life that I'll never forget, and how valuable that is as a leader. Now, today I know from our book, 30 Virtues That Build a Man, we're looking at a text from Romans here, and we're talking about how God is the ultimate authority, that we have to have ultimate authority in our life. And I think for many guys, this is really a challenge, right? I mean, it's really a challenge for us to submit to authority. I know that I found it to be a challenge in my life, but I think what God is saying is I've established certain authorities in life and you need to trust them. And clearly from this text, we understand that God has established the authority of government by his hand, and we're called to submit to that. I think most guys really struggle with this.
Well, how do you do that on a daily basis? How do you make submission habitual and strive for excellence in the way you submit, and where do you get the motivation to do that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is really where my relationship with Christ began, Chris, was understanding that I've tried life on my own, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't work all that great, to be quite honest.
Concur.
I, as the master of my own domain and as the driver of my own car and ship, I've struggled to learn that by happenstance and by failure, that me being and designing my path through life doesn't work. And of course, I think many men come to a moment in their life where they discover that, yeah, I thought my plan was going to work, but it doesn't work. And the beauty of God is that God is right all the time, right? Truth is all truth is God's truth, and he's right every single time. And so I had to, at some moment in my life, abdicate my ways and really begin to trust in God. And I think that's where submission begins. That's where it began with me, is realizing that truth can't be found, really, I would say, and these are deep words here, within my own subjective reality. I'm going to have to find truth outside of myself, right? And that's when I came to discover that God had designed a way to live life for man, that he is really the creator of man.
Right.
So he knows the best way for man to live. And therefore, I just had to, at some point, submit to him. And I found that Jesus was that model man that I was really wanting to model my life after. And he lived in perfect submission to God in all aspects. And that is really what drew me into the Christian kingdom, was I was looking for something greater than myself to trust in. So that's probably a
And there
good
you go.
answer.
There's the word. You
Yeah.
can submit because you
Trust.
If you didn't trust, you're not. If you didn't trust me to get in the airplane,
Yeah.
you'd have been out of there. If I didn't trust the other three pilots,
Yeah.
we would not have joined that formation. So submission is empowered and driven and intensified by
And
trust.
it's that glue, right?
Right.
That brings that submission together, and it means to trust in something greater than ourselves, right?
But it's still a habitual daily
Yes.
thing. We go into daily habitual actions, and we have tools for that in T6 Victory. But looking at from a gospel-centered Christian standpoint, what do you think is the best way on a daily basis to just keep coming back to that touchstone or that wellspring of trust, increasing your submission and your ability to submit to Christ as Lord?
You know, I think guys out there probably need to hear these kinds of things, but I think that if we begin every day by submitting to God first, and understanding that in that first relationship, that is where submission begins, then submitting throughout our day gets easier. I think we rebel against submission deep in our heart.
It's natural man.
That's the natural man. Our human spirit opposes God's way.
Right.
We just are unwilling to admit it sometimes. And I think by just kind of blindly submitting to little things in our life, like once in a while, I would say submitting to our boss blindly and learning, right, that impulse, I think we grow in submission. Every boss isn't perfect, right? But sometimes it's not about submitting to the person. It's about the heart, right? Mm-hmm. Submitting to something outside of ourselves, right? It has less to do with the person on the other side and more about the person inside.
And that's especially true about Romans 12,
Yeah.
about government.
Exactly. And while we want to complain about government, there's something about it that God has still designed that's beautiful. God designed that.
Right.
God designed marriage. He designed the church. He designed man. He designed the government. And there's part of us that just needs to submit and trust. There's your word again. Trust him for all things. And so I think it just beginning today was saying, God, even if I don't get my way, I'm going to trust you. Maybe try this. I think guys could even try this. God, what are you trying to teach me through this circumstance? Rather than rebel against moments and refuse to submit to an evil boss, maybe it's learning what God is calling us to submit to, even though we have maybe what feels like to be an evil, manipulative boss. Right. And looking for the greater good that God is trying to teach us through. How does he want to submit? And what does that look like? And searching for that. I think if more guys found it, then, man, we'd be better men in the end. So, guys, just want to say thank you for being with us. Chris, thanks so much. I really appreciate what you do. Guys need to check out T6 Victory because it is an awesome opportunity to not only grow your leadership, but to really bring great business practices into maybe your small, medium, large size business and use it as a training vehicle for guys. You guys got to go up with an F-18 pilot. It will change your life. I promise you. You might vomit a time or two too.
I'll try to avoid that.
Yeah, but I got to tell you what great lessons I've learned from you, Chris. Really appreciate it. And guys, if you're out there today, I want to highly encourage you to pick up a copy of 30 Virtues That Build a Man. You can get it right from our website. That's beresolute.org/THIRTY30. Go pick up the book today. Share it with another guy just like Chris and I are sharing. And we'll see you right back here next time on another edition of Man Talk.